Hey everyone. I was told, nay, promised, that the weather would clear up via 3 separate weather apps. Well, you be the judge. You know, if I missed as many shots as days where meteorologists were incorrect about the weather, I don't know if I would have a job anymore. And that's no shade to meteorologists. Mainly just jealousy. Hey, everybody, what's the best portrait focal length? Well, the best one is the most expensive one, right? At least that's what all the uncles at weddings think.
Wow, heck of a camera you got there. How much that cost you? You know, I used to do some photography back in the day.
Focal length can determine a lot about the feeling of a scene or a photo. Traditionally, 35mm, 50mm, and 85mm lenses are used for portraits most often, especially for events like weddings. Landscape photos, on the other hand, are often taken on wider lenses like your mom. It must have been the wind. 20mm or 24mm. This is super generalized, obviously, but of course you can use whatever you'd like. You can use a 600mm if you want, but your choice has consequences. There are trade-offs, changes in feeling and emotion, distortion, background separation, the list goes on, but what actually is the difference? And what does that look like for portraits? Well, let's crack the case. My go-to lens for portraits is a 35mm. It's a really nice balance of looking natural to my eye and is a great all-around focal length, and it's pretty similar to what we see with our eyes. When I shoot weddings, I usually use a 35mm and an 85mm, which is what I'd say most wedding photographers use, generally speaking. Although in recent years, I've seen a lot of people rocking the 35 to 150 and the 28 to 70 f2. And wow, do I not love zoom lenses, except for my 70 to 200 for wedding photos and big fella right here for all my birding needs. It's sort of a combination of weight and just a bit of variance in focal lengths in a zoom that I just don't love. Mainly on the editing side. Shooting is great. I can just stand in one spot and who cares? Some people love a 50mm. Some people love a 135. There are all kinds of lenses, but really what is the difference with regards to focal length? And the answer is compression, baby! And what even the twick is compression? Well, compression is an effect where the background appears closer to the foreground. This becomes more pronounced the longer your focal length, so a 20mm lens will have less compression than an 85mm lens, for example. This can result in more background separation from your subject and more dramatic landscapes. Look at these photos with the landscapes in the background. By using a longer focal length, the background appears closer, which makes things like mountains and trees and other cool stuff look more dramatic compared to our subject. On the flip side, using something like a 20mm decreases the compression and our scene has less compression. Decreases the compression and our scene has less compression. Who wrote this? Using something like a 20mm decreases the compression in our photo, which can make things look a little more flat. But this can work really well when we want to let the depth of a scene show itself off a bit, or if we want to include more elements in our photo. Now that's all fine and good, but how does it play into portraits? Well, there are lots of great videos already on the subject, so what you need is for me to add to the pile. Content, 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 content. Here are some examples using some different lenses, adjusted for distance to assure my face fills about the same amount of the frame. You can see how my face changes in each image, and you can see how the background changes as well. It looks much closer with the 85mm, but with the 20mm it looks wider and more grand. Things are a little bit more separated from me. This is actually difficult to do by myself.
I'm just standing in the water. This is poor planning.
Now, when I'm packing for a shoot, how do I pick which lens to choose? That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. If I'm shooting a wedding, my entire day can be done between a 20 mil, a 35 mil, an 85 mil, and a 70 to 200. 20 mil is great for establishing shots, for getting some wide landscapes, some wide shots of the rooms, and maybe even some close-ups of the wedding dress or like some interesting portraits. If it's super tight space, like a small hotel room, this comes in really handy. The 35mm and 85mm live on my cameras for 90% of the day, but I pull out the big boy, the 70-200 for some of the ceremony and some of the reception as well. There's no better lens for candids for me, and I love getting all up into people's businesses from across the room. I have no boundaries. If I could only use two lenses, I'd rock the 35mm and the 85mm. With both options, I can cover a lot of ground. While my 35mm is my favorite all-around lens, it's kind of like the safest option. It's the Mario of lenses. That reference is gonna hit for the gamer community. My absolute favorite shots usually come from my 85mm. Every time I get the 85 on and snap portraits, I love how the background looks so creamy and how everything looks so gorgeous. And for once, everything in life seems to make sense, which is a really boring and not new opinion. It's like when you go to a new country and then you go and do the most touristy thing. On one hand, that kind of sucks because it is just what everybody else does. But there's also a reason why those spots are touristy, right? Like Niagara Falls is super cool, even though I've been there like 60 times. Now, what about for non-weddings? I shoot a lot of corporate things, music videos, bands, all that stuff. And I think of these a little bit more stylistically, similar to the way that a director or cinematographer thinks about setting up a scene in a movie. Sometimes a 20mm can induce a more of an intimate feeling. Sometimes it can be a bit more panicked. It lets you into the scene a little bit more. The studio actually does a great job at this. I think that show uses like a 21mm lens for the whole show, and you kind of feel like you're right in the action. Other than that, I love using my 35mm for almost everything. It's a workhorse, and I love it as a little go-to option. Your personal use case will always be different. 50mm is another super common portrait lens and has a natural feel similar to the 35mm, but it's a little more elevated. In a way, most major brands make a 50mm 1.2, and it's always kind of the king of the prime lineup. And while I love the tiniest depth of field you can get from these lenses, they're heavy, and 50mm just never really spoke to me in a lens lineup personally, especially because these days I'm tending to lighter lenses in my old age as someone born in the 1900s. Old! Let me know what you think. What are your favorite lenses to use for portraits? How do you pick a lens? I love learning about what other people do for their process because it helps inform mine. Until next time, bye.